know, the funny thing is, it's been a while since I've sat down and talked to you guys about a brand new release game that I just recently played, and just give you guys my impressions on the story, the characters, the graphics, the gameplay, what have you. And for today, we're talking about Trails Through Daybreak, the latest game for us Westerners in the Trails series. As Japanese players have enjoyed this game for about 3 years, they've already have the second game in Japan, and they're about to enjoy the next game, Kai no Kiseki. And yeah, there's definitely a history behind how far behind we are in regards to Trails releases versus Japan. But I don't want to devolve into that whole topic there. But aside from that, in terms of my impressions so far with Trails Through Daybreak, this might be a Game of the Year contender for me. If it's not Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D, that'll be my Game of the Year. Most likely, Trails Through Daybreak will be my Game of the Year. Of course, we'll have to see whenever Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D comes out. And also, for anyone who's new to my channel, if you're a Trails fan and never seen any of my videos, I do have a Trails video that I made back in April. So you want my general thoughts on the Trails series, do check out that video, though I don't really go too much into story details. I mostly just focus on gameplay and just my overall thoughts on each game. But anyways, before we go more deeply into Trails Through Daybreak, what I thought about the game in terms of the battle system, what have you, make sure you go and hit that like button, share this video around, subscribe, and click that notification bell. So I guess the first thing I want to quickly touch on is the story, though like I said, I'm not going to go too deep into spoilers. I'm mostly just going to talk about the characters and just some plot details here and there, just to give you guys a general understanding of what the story is in Trails Through Daybreak. As in this game, you play as a guy named Fan Alcride, a guy who basically works as this bounty hunter that does these borderline illegal jobs within the country of Calvard. And these people, based on what I played, are not really well respected, primarily because of the fact they go out and do these illegal works. And one day, Fawn is elicited by a young girl named Agnes to find this orphan that's been passed down through her family, and then it becomes this whole story overall. And just based on my experience from the prologue, which I did live stream, so check that out, and playing Chapter 1 on my own time, I definitely do see the story loop in Trails Through Daybreak, which is pretty typical for Falcom games, where they kind of get you into the idea that each chapter is going to play out the same when it comes down to story beats. And definitely Trails Through Daybreak is no different in my eyes in that regard. As I'm not going to say too much about it, but definitely for sure, it definitely feels right at home when you play through Trails Through Daybreak and you kind of see which story beats are going to play out in each of these chapters throughout the game. And aside from that, in terms of the characters I've met so far, I do like Van. He's a pretty cool character. Agnes is a nice, sweet girl. She kind of reminds me of a younger version of Ellie if you played through the Crossbow games, but instead we just have a younger girl who goes to school and what have you. And in regards to the other characters, you have some returning characters in this game alongside some brand new characters, and I'll just say some of them are pretty interesting and it's pretty cool some characters are returning, and some of them do make sense that they're returning in this game, as I don't want to spoil too much about that. But anyways, let's quickly move on to the gameplay. As the one major change, of course, is the combat system, as rather than just being a full-on turn-based game, it's now a hybrid system between action combat and turn-based. I'm not saying they're trying to combine both action and turn-based into one combat system. They actually have two separate combat systems, one being action and the other being turn-based. And to quickly talk about this, no, the action combat doesn't oversee the turn-based combat in my opinion. It's more so meant to complement the turn-based experience. As for the most part, you can play through this game completely turn-based if you want to. The only time you need to do the action combat is through a tutorial section. But even then, I do think you should give the action combat a try. Not saying that you should completely use it all the time, just at least give it a try, because the way it works is that when you go out and face a group of enemies, you essentially go out and attack them a few times, stun them, and then you can press the X button to enter into the turn-based mode. And that way you can get some extra goodies when fighting against the said enemy. In many ways, the action combat is more so meant to take down weaker enemies, so when you take down the stronger enemies, you don't need to worry about the weak enemies, you just focus on one enemy at a time. And speaking about the turn-based combat, there is indeed some changes made in the turn-based combat that essentially streamline things and make battles go much more quicker. As the one change I noticed is the ability to move around freely in the battlefield while performing your attacks, your crafts, or your arts. As in previous Trails games, you could only move and attack separately. You couldn't use your craft and move at the same time, but now with Trails Through Daybreak, where you're allowed to move around freely while performing a craft or using an art, it gives you much more flexibility and freedom to try to attack all the enemies at once. And I definitely do appreciate these incremental changes they've made to the combat system. And speaking about major changes, another change that's made to Trails Through Daybreak is the Orbinus system. And this is definitely a major change to the system in comparison to jumping from the Crossbell games to Cold Steel, for example. It's kind of back to how it was previously, but much more expanded in a way. There are some Orbinus that give you a specific spell, but for the most part, the way how the Orbinus system works, you have to fine-tune and select the right Orbinus for each system, and I'm still trying to learn the ropes overall, but definitely for sure, once I get the hang of it, I'm definitely going to make sure I max out all my characters when using the system. And now moving on, let's talk about the progression of this game. It's relatively linear, and to be fair, most Trails games are relatively linear, but I definitely felt with this game is a lot more linear in comparison. As the best way I can give it is, in Trails in the Sky, you have the main mission to worry about, but you also have a bunch of side quests to do, which that allowed you a lot of freedom to do. But in Trails Through Daybreak, they definitely piecemeal you a lot more side quests throughout the adventure, so there's a little less flexibility when it comes down to which side quests you want to do first in comparison to what you were able to do before in Trails in the Sky. Though to be fair, I only played up to Chapter 1, so I'm not entirely sure if that's 100% true, but just based on my experience, I definitely knew it was a lot more linear. And the side quests kind of play like many other side quests in the Trails games, whether it's a fetch quest talking to multiple people, or taking down a strong enemy. Though the one thing that side quests now add in is this morality system, where at a point in time, your main character has to decide, oh, do I have to spare this guy? Do I blackmail this guy? All this stuff right here. And it fills up a gauge between Law, Gray, and Chaos. And so far, I haven't really noticed too much of a difference. I didn't notice an instance where, oh, if you had Law only, it will affect the story this way, or if you went through the Chaos route, it'll affect the story that way. I didn't really notice that just yet, but to be fair, like I said, I only played up to Chapter 1. But other than that, there's some few things here and there, like cooking and what have you, but for the most part, it's relatively a linear experience so far. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the graphics. And there's definitely a massive improvement to graphics here in comparison to the past Trails games. And that's primarily because Falcom chose to use their own internal engine this time around, and it definitely shows, as the game looks much more prettier in comparison to Cold Steel, character models look on point, texture-wise things look relatively good, and it doesn't stop there with textures and presentation-wise, it also affects how you explore the world. As previously before, a lot of things were in loading zones. For example, if you want to go into a building, it will load into the building. If you go to a different area, it will load into that said area. But in Trails Through Daybreak, it's not completely 100% open world, but when you enter a building, it just seamlessly lets you into the building, without loading any loading zone here and there. If you go to another area in a dungeon, it doesn't load into that next area, it lets you go through that area. And I have to say, the loading zones are definitely less frequent in Trails Through Daybreak in comparison to Cold Steel, for example, where a dungeon will have like about 3 to 4 loading zones, while in Trails Through Daybreak, the only loading zone was entering into the dungeon itself. So yeah, for sure, switching to this engine definitely shows its benefits, not only with graphics, but also tech-wise as well. But even then, there's some few critiques here and there. Some cutscenes are relatively static when it comes down to it, which has always been the thing with the Trails games, so it's not that big of a deal for me, but it's something to point out, especially when you have this brand new engine, and there's a lot of improvements to graphics and overall tech. And then the last thing I want to mention for now is the music. And this one definitely grew on me over time. At first, I didn't really think too much about the music. It was fine, the battle music was okay at first, but then over time I was like, man, this music's really damn good. The battle music grew on me, some of the boss battle themes were raw as hell, and some of the overall music was pretty good as well. And one thing I have to say is that the worst that Falcom music has been for me has just been mid. And Trails Through Daybreak is pretty damn good. Not my favorite. I still think Trails from Zero is my top tier Trails OST. But Trails Through Daybreak, not too bad. But anyways, those are so far just my thoughts on Trails Through Daybreak. I have to say, I've been enjoying my time so far. I want to get more into Trails Through Daybreak, play Chapter 2 for today. And hopefully whenever I beat the game, I can still say, yeah, this is a contender for Game of the Year. Whenever Triangle 3 HD 2D comes out, these two are going to go head to head against one another. But anyways, if you played the game before, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you haven't played the game, maybe give this one a try. I wouldn't say maybe this will be your first experience. I would still recommend playing Trails in the Sky first. Just my thoughts. Though if you do play this game, I wouldn't mind all too much. And also don't forget to leave this video a like and subscribe as well. And if you want to see more videos, do check out these videos right here. I personally think you'll enjoy them. See you guys on the next one. Take care.